Single mom can't afford her daughter's medicine. Then the black CEO behind her whispered, "Charge it to me." The sterile, fluorescent lights of the 24-hour pharmacy hummed a merciless tune, each flicker a tiny hammer against Alara's frayed nerves. In her arms, 5-year-old Lily coughed, a dry, rattling sound that tore through the quiet of the late hour and straight into her mother's heart. The small plastic bag in Alara's hand felt impossibly heavy. Inside it, a nebulizer treatment and an emergency inhaler that cost more than her last 2 paychecks combined. The pimply-faced pharmacist, barely a man himself, stared at her with a practiced look of impatient pity. The screen of the card reader was a blood-red monument to her failure. Insufficient funds. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's declined again." The words were quiet, but they echoed in the cavern of her exhaustion. Humiliation, hot and sharp, pricked at the back of her eyes. She shifted Lily's weight, trying to think, but her mind was a snowstorm of panic. She had nothing left, no one to call. This was it, the end of the line. Before the sob could escape her throat, a voice, deep and smooth as polished mahogany, spoke from directly behind her. It was so close, the resonance of it seemed to vibrate through her worn coat. "Charge it to me." How could this single, quiet act of kindness from a complete stranger, a shadow in a pharmacy at 2 in the morning, unravel 2 broken lives and weave them into a tapestry of hope? Alara spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. The man was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark wool overcoat that probably cost more than her apartment's rent for an entire year. His face was angular and handsome, his eyes dark and piercing, holding a profound stillness that seemed at odds with the frantic energy of her own crisis. He wasn't looking at her, but at the pharmacist, his expression unreadable. He held out a sleek, black credit card. The pharmacist, suddenly alert and deferential, took the card without a word. The transaction was over in seconds. The machine chirped its approval. "Here you go, ma'am," the young man said, sliding the bag and receipt across the counter to Alara. She stared at the bag, then at the stranger. Words felt clumsy, inadequate. I don't know what to say. "Thank you. Please let me get your information. I'll pay you back. I swear I will." She fumbled in her purse for a pen, her hands shaking. The man's gaze finally settled on her, and for a fleeting moment, the cool composure in his eyes softened as he glanced at the sleeping child in her arms. "That won't be necessary." "No, it is," she insisted, a desperate need to reclaim some sliver of her dignity rising within her. "I don't take charity. Please." He seemed to consider this for a moment. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and produced a simple, heavy-stock business card. It was stark white, with a single, elegant logo and a name embossed in black. Julian Vance, CEO, Vance Innovations. There was a corporate address and a main office number. Nothing personal. "Send a check to the office if you must," he said, his voice gentle but firm, a clear dismissal. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and then turned, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the linoleum as he walked out into the cold, rain-slicked night, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Alara stood there for a long moment, the precious bag of medicine in one hand and the impossible business card in the other. Vance Innovations. She'd seen the name on skyscrapers downtown, a titan of the tech industry. The CEO. He had paid for her daughter's medicine. The sheer unlikeliness of it made her head spin. Back in her cramped, drafty apartment, she administered the nebulizer to Lily, whose breathing finally eased into the soft, even rhythm of peaceful sleep. Alara watched her, tears of relief and gratitude silently tracing paths down her weary face. The next morning, clutching the business card like a talisman, she resolved to pay back the debt. It wasn't just about the money. It was about her pride. It was about proving to herself as much as to anyone that she was not a charity case. Her first attempt was a lesson in futility. She called the main number for Vance Innovations and was met with an automated system that led her through an endless labyrinth of options before she finally reached a human being. A crisp, professional receptionist who sounded more like a machine than the actual machine. I need to speak with Mr. Julian Vance, please. May I ask who is calling? My name is Alara. He helped me last night, and I need to arrange to pay him back. There was a pause. Mr. Vance's schedule is managed by his executive assistant. I can't connect you directly. Is there a message you'd like me to pass along? Alara knew a dead end when she heard one. No, thank you. I'll try again later. She tried again the next day and the day after. She tried asking for his assistant, for the accounting department, for anyone who could process a personal repayment. Each time, she was met with the same polite, impenetrable wall. It was clear that the fortress of Vance Innovations was not designed for people like her to get in. She felt a growing sense of frustration. This man had performed an incredible act of kindness, yet he remained as inaccessible as a king in his castle. Meanwhile, Julian Vance was not a man who left things to chance. The encounter in the pharmacy had unsettled him. It wasn't the money. It was the woman's eyes. He had seen a desperation in them that he recognized, a reflection of a despair he had once known intimately. And the child, so small and fragile, had stirred something in him, a long-dormant ache he had spent years burying under a mountain of work and success. He hadn't just walked away. The morning after, he had made a single call to the head of his security team, a discreet former federal agent named Marcus. The pharmacy on Elm and 9th, around 2 a.m. A woman with a little girl. Find her. Within hours, Marcus had a name, an address, and a story. Alara Jensen, a single mother working 2 cleaning jobs, barely scraping by. Landlord was threatening eviction. The child, Lily, had chronic, severe asthma. The report was a bleak litany of hardship, but one detail stood out to Julian. Alara had no criminal record, no history of drug use, no hint of anything other than a woman fighting an uphill battle with unwavering integrity. He sat in his penthouse office, a glass-walled cage overlooking the sprawling city, and stared at her file. He could just send a check, an anonymous donation through one of his charitable foundations. It would be the clean, simple thing to do. But something stopped him. He remembered her fierce insistence on paying him back, the pride that burned brighter than the fear in her eyes. Charity would be an insult, but an opportunity. That was different. 2 days later, a black town car, so polished it seemed to absorb the gray light of the afternoon, pulled up in front of Alara's crumbling apartment building. Julian Vance stepped out, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the graffiti-scarred brick and rusted fire escapes. He took a breath, the unfamiliar scent of damp concrete and urban struggle filling his lungs, and buzzed her apartment. Alara's voice, tinny through the intercom, was laced with suspicion. Who is it? It's Julian Vance. The silence that followed was so long he thought she might not answer. Finally, the lock buzzed, a harsh, grating sound. She opened the door just a crack, her body language defensive. She was holding a damp cloth, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired, but her gaze was direct. Mr. Vance, I've been trying to call your office. I know. They told me, he said smoothly. May I come in? She hesitated, then opened the door wider. The apartment was tiny, but it was spotlessly clean. A child's colorful drawings were taped to the peeling walls, a cheerful rebellion against the shabbiness of the space. Lily was sitting on a threadbare rug, quietly coloring in a book. She looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. I came here to offer you a job, Julian said, getting straight to the point. He knew that for a woman like her, dancing around the subject would feel condescending. Alara's eyebrows shot up. A job? Doing what? My penthouse. It requires management. I need a household manager. Someone to oversee the cleaning staff, manage deliveries, keep the place organized. The hours are flexible. The pay is substantial. And it comes with a residence. She stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and distrust. A residence? Why me? You don't know me. You could hire a professional agency, someone with experience. I'm a good judge of character, he said, his gaze unwavering. And I prefer discretion. It was a half-truth. He did value those things, but the real reason was far more personal. He saw in her a quiet strength he admired, a resilience that resonated with his own buried pain. I can't accept that," she stammered. "It feels like what? Charity?" He finished her sentence, his tone devoid of judgment. "It's not. It's a position that needs filling. I'm offering you a solution that also happens to solve a problem for me. It's business." To test his own theory about her, to confirm the integrity he saw in her file, he employed a simple, calculated maneuver. As he spoke, he casually placed his briefcase on her small, wobbly coffee table. When he prepared to leave a few minutes later, after giving her the written offer to consider, he would forget his wallet next to it. A thick, leather billfold, visibly full of cash and platinum cards. "Think about it," he said, moving toward the door. "The offer includes a full health insurance plan. For you and your daughter." That was the arrow that found its mark. Health insurance. The words were a prayer answered. The constant, gnawing fear of Lily getting sick, of another late-night pharmacy run she couldn't afford, was a weight she carried every second of every day. He saw the shift in her eyes, the flicker of desperate hope warring with her pride. "I'll leave you the details," he said. He stood up, picked up his briefcase, and walked out, leaving the wallet behind. Alara stood frozen in her living room, the crisp, embossed paper of the job offer trembling in her hand. The salary listed was more than she made in a year. A 2-bedroom staff apartment in his building. Health insurance. It was a lifeline so extravagant it felt like a dream. But her eyes were fixed on the wallet sitting on her table. It was a test. She knew it instinctively. A test to see if she was the kind of person who would take advantage, who would prove the suspicions she saw lurking behind his polite offer. The temptation was a fleeting, ugly thing. One of those bills could feed them for a week, fix the rattling engine in her car. But it would cost her something far more valuable, her self-respect. An hour later, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? It's Julian Vance. It appears I've left my wallet at your apartment." His voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "Yes," she said, her own voice steady. "I have it here for you. It's safe. I'll send my driver to collect it." "I'd rather bring it to you myself," she said firmly. "I'll come to your office tomorrow morning, and I'll give you my answer then." When she arrived at the gleaming, monolithic tower of Vance Innovations the next day, she felt as though she had stepped into another world. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and steel, filled with important-looking people moving with purpose. She clutched her worn purse, the heavy leather wallet tucked safely inside, and gave her name at the security desk. To her surprise, she was expected. A moment later, a woman with a sleek haircut and an expensive suit escorted her to a private elevator. Julian's office was at the very top, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a godlike view of the city. He was standing by the window when she entered, a silhouette against the morning light. He turned to face her. "Ms. Jensen." "Mr. Vance." She walked to his massive desk and placed the wallet squarely in the center. "You forgot this." He didn't even glance at it. His eyes were on her. "Thank you. I've thought about your offer," she said, taking a deep breath. "For my daughter's sake, for the health insurance, I accept. But I want to be very clear. I will work for every single penny. I will earn my keep. And," she added, pushing a small, crumpled envelope across the desk toward him, "this is the first installment. It's not much, but I will pay you back for the medicine." Julian looked down at the envelope. Inside, he knew, would be what little cash she had in the world. He had seen the bank statements in her file. This gesture, this fierce, stubborn pride, was exactly what he had hoped to find. He pushed the envelope gently back toward her. "Your first duty as my household manager," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips for the first time, "is to handle petty cash. Consider the medicine your first approved expenditure. Welcome to the company, Alara." Moving into the staff apartment on the 5th floor of Julian's opulent building was like entering a parallel universe. The two-bedroom unit was larger than her entire old apartment, with new appliances, soft carpets, and, most importantly, a state-of-the-art air filtration system. For the first time in years, Lily slept through the night without a single cough. Alara felt a wave of gratitude so profound it almost brought her to her knees. She threw herself into the job with a quiet, determined efficiency. Julian's penthouse was a testament to his life. Vast, beautiful, and profoundly empty. It was a museum of a life, not a home. There were no photographs, no personal trinkets, only expensive art and perfectly arranged designer furniture. Her duties were, as he'd said, vague. She managed the weekly cleaning crew, signed for packages, and stocked the minimalist kitchen with organic foods he rarely ate. Mostly, she found herself simply trying to breathe a little warmth into the sterile space. The real shift began, as it always did, with Lily. Unintimidated by the cavernous rooms or Julian's reserved demeanor, Lily adopted the penthouse as her personal kingdom. She would sit on the plush white rugs and draw, her crayons a vibrant splash of chaos in the monochrome order. She left her masterpieces in strategic locations for Mr. Julian to find. A smiling sun taped to his refrigerator, a wobbly drawing of a cat on the desk in his home office. Alara would scold her gently. "Lily, honey, you can't leave your things all over Mr. Vance's house." Lily would just look up at her with solemn eyes. "But his house is sad. It needs more colors." Julian, to Alara's surprise, never complained. At first, he would simply move the drawings aside, his expression unreadable. But one evening, Alara saw him pause before entering his office, looking at the drawing of the cat for a long moment before he went inside. The next day, she noticed the drawing was no longer on the desk, but affixed neatly to the corner of his giant computer monitor with a small piece of tape. A cautious routine began to form. Julian started coming home from work a little earlier each day. He would often find Lily in the grand living room, and a quiet ritual would unfold. "Hello, Lily," he would say, his deep voice softening almost imperceptibly. "Hello, Mr. Julian," she would reply, not looking up from her coloring. "Did you have a good day fighting the business dragons?" The first time she said it, Julian had stopped dead in his tracks. "The what?" "The business dragons," Lily repeated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Mommy says you work very hard at a big company, so you must be fighting dragons." A strange sound escaped Julian's throat, a rusty noise he barely recognized as a chuckle. "Yes, something like that." From then on, it became their joke. He would come home and she would ask about the dragons. He would tell her they were particularly scaly that day, or that he had managed to put one to sleep with a very boring spreadsheet. Food became another bridge between their separate worlds. Alara noticed that Julian subsisted on catered meals and takeout, all of it expensive and impersonal. One evening, emboldened by his softening demeanor, she cooked a simple chicken pot pie, the kind her own mother used to make. She left a portion on a plate in his kitchen with a small note. "I made too much. Thought you might like some." She went down to her own apartment with her heart pounding, certain she had overstepped. But the next morning, the plate was in the dishwasher, scrubbed clean. He didn't mention it, but that night, when he came home, he looked at her and asked, "Are there any leftovers from last night?" It became their new normal. She would cook, and they would eat together at the massive marble island in his kitchen, the three of them. The conversations were simple at first, revolving around Lily's day or the weather. But slowly, tentatively, they began to share small pieces of themselves. He learned she had grown up in a small town, that she had dreamed of being a teacher before life got in the way. She learned he enjoyed classical music and had a surprising knowledge of astronomy. These quiet evenings were building something fragile and precious between them. Trust, respect, a sense of domesticity that neither of them had realized they were starving for. Alara would watch him with Lily, reading her a bedtime story or patiently helping her build a lopsided tower of blocks, and she would see past the powerful CEO to the man beneath, a man who was profoundly lonely. The vast, empty spaces in his home were nothing compared to the emptiness she was beginning to see in his eyes. She felt an unexpected, dangerous pull toward him, a desire to fill that void, just as she was filling his home with the scent of baking bread and the sound of a child's laughter. The turning point came on a Tuesday night. A sudden cold front had swept through the city, and the change in air pressure was a trigger for Lily's asthma. It started with a small wheeze, but quickly escalated. Alara, practiced and calm, immediately got out the nebulizer. But this time was different. It was a bad attack, the kind that always sent a spike of pure terror through her veins. As she held the mask to Lily's struggling face, she was dimly aware of Julian appearing in the doorway, drawn by the sound of the machine and Lily's labored gasps for air. She expected him to be an awkward bystander, perhaps to offer to call a doctor. Instead, he froze. All the color drained from his face, his body rigid, his eyes wide with a horror that went far beyond mere concern. He looked as if he were seeing a ghost. His breath hitched, and he took an involuntary step back, one hand coming up to press against his chest. Alara's focus was on Lily, but a part of her registered his extreme reaction. Lily's breathing finally began to stabilize, the medicine working its magic. The terrifying rasping sounds softened into deep, even breaths as she drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the effort. Alara gently laid her down on the sofa, pulling a soft cashmere throw over her small body. Only then did she turn to Julian. He was still standing in the exact same spot, his face a mask of anguish. "Julian?" she said softly, using his first name without thinking. "Are you all right?" He didn't seem to hear her. He was staring at Lily, but his gaze was distant, lost in a memory that was clearly agonizing. "Julian," she said again, stepping closer and placing a gentle hand on his arm. The contact seemed to break the spell. He flinched, then looked down at her, his eyes hollow. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse. I need some air." He turned and walked stiffly out onto the massive terrace, closing the glass door behind him. Alara hesitated for a moment, then followed. The night air was cold and sharp. The city lights glittered below them like a fallen constellation. He was leaning against the railing, his back to her, his shoulders slumped. She stood a few feet away, not wanting to intrude, but unwilling to leave him alone in such obvious pain. "Her name was Sophie," he said suddenly, his voice thick with unshed tears. He didn't turn around. "My daughter. She would have been 7 this year." The words hung in the cold air. Alara's heart clenched. She had wondered, of course, the empty house, the sadness in his eyes. But this was a grief so profound she could feel it radiating off him like a physical force. "She had asthma," he continued, his voice cracking, "just like Lily. Usually it was manageable. We knew what to do." He finally turned to face her, and in the dim light from the penthouse, she could see the sheen of tears on his cheeks. "There was an accident. A car crash. My wife, Sarah. She died instantly." He choked on the words, taking a ragged breath before he could go on. "Sophie was in the back. She was alive, but she was trapped. And she was having an attack. A bad one. I couldn't get to her in time. The paramedics, they tried. But by the time they freed her..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. He buried his face in his hands, and a raw, broken sob was torn from his chest. "I listened to her struggling to breathe," he whispered into his hands, "just like Lily tonight, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't save her." In that moment, everything clicked into place. His kindness at the pharmacy, the job offer, the way he looked at Lily. It wasn't just charity or pity. It was a desperate, unconscious attempt to rewrite the past, to save the child he couldn't save before. Alara's own tears began to fall. For him, for the wife and daughter he had lost, for the crushing weight of guilt he had been carrying alone for all these years. Without a word, she closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him. He was stiff at first, surprised by the contact, but then he collapsed against her, his tall frame shaking with the force of his grief. He held onto her as if she were a lifeline, burying his face in her shoulder, and wept. He wept for his wife, for his daughter, for the empty years and the silent house. And Alara just held him, stroking his back, murmuring soft, soothing words, offering the simple, profound comfort of human connection. She was no longer just his employee. He was no longer just her benefactor. In that shared moment of vulnerability, on a cold terrace high above the sleeping city, they were just two broken people, finding solace in each other's arms. After that night, the last invisible wall between them crumbled. The penthouse, once a silent monument to grief, began to feel like a home. Laughter, a sound Julian hadn't truly heard in years, became a regular guest. He taught Lily how to play chess, patiently explaining the moves of each piece. She, in turn, taught him the proper way to have a tea party with stuffed animals, insisting he use a silly, high-pitched voice for Mr. Bear. Alara would watch them, a warmth spreading through her chest that was both wonderful and terrifying. She was falling in love with him. She was falling for the kind, wounded man who was slowly, painstakingly, coming back to life. Julian, too, found himself seeing Alara in a new light. He saw not just her strength and integrity, but her quiet wit, her gentle compassion, the fierce, unconditional love she had for her daughter. He realized that the silence in his life hadn't been peace. It had been an absence. Alara and Lily had filled that absence with color, with warmth, with the messy, beautiful chaos of life. He started delegating more at work, leaving the office at a reasonable hour, eager to get back to the little family that was unintentionally forming within his walls. One of his first acts of this new life was to replace Alara's thin, frayed coat. He noticed her shivering one afternoon as they walked Lily home from a nearby park. The next day, a box from a high-end boutique was delivered. Inside was a beautiful, deep blue cashmere coat, exquisitely tailored and impossibly soft. "Julian, you can't," she protested, her cheeks flushing. "This is too much." "It's just a coat, Alara," he said gently. "It's cold outside. Let me do this." "Please," he helped her put it on, his hands lingering on her shoulders for a moment longer than necessary. The simple garment was a powerful symbol. He was no longer just providing a roof over her head. He was actively taking care of her, protecting her. The true test of their burgeoning new reality came in the form of the annual Vance Innovations Charity Gala. It was the premier social event of the season, a night where the city's elite gathered to write enormous checks and network. In previous years, Julian had attended out of obligation, a grim duty he performed with detached efficiency. This year, the thought of it filled him with a different kind of anxiety. He found Alara in the kitchen, preparing dinner. "I have the annual company gala next Friday," he said, his tone carefully casual. "I was wondering if you would consider attending with me." Alara froze, a wooden spoon hovering over a simmering pot. "With you? Julian, I can't. I don't have anything to wear. I wouldn't fit in with those people." "You'll let me worry about that," he said, his eyes pleading with her. "I don't want to go alone. I want you by my side." The day of the gala, a professional stylist arrived at the penthouse with an entire rack of designer gowns. Alara, overwhelmed, finally chose a simple, elegant emerald green dress that shimmered under the light. When she emerged from her room that evening, her hair and makeup done, Julian was waiting for her in the foyer. He was breathtaking in a classic tuxedo, but his eyes were only for her. He stopped breathing for a second, his expression one of pure awe. "You look incredible," he said, his voice thick. Walking into the grand ballroom on Julian's arm felt like stepping into a fairy tale. The room was a galaxy of crystal chandeliers and flashing diamonds. Alara felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, a wave of curiosity and judgment washing over the crowd. Who was this unknown woman with the notoriously reclusive Julian Vance? But Julian never left her side, his hand resting possessively in the small of her back, a silent declaration to the world. Later in the evening, when the orchestra began to play a slow waltz, he led her to the dance floor. "May I have this dance?" he asked formally, a boyish smile on his face. She melted into his arms, her head resting against his chest. They moved together as if they were the only two people in the room. The scent of his cologne, the solid feel of his hand in hers, the gentle rhythm of his heart beating against her ear. It was intoxicating. "Thank you for this, Julian," she whispered. "I feel like Cinderella." He pulled back slightly to look down at her, his dark eyes intense. "There's no midnight curfew on this, Elara. This is real." As they danced, a photographer's flash went off, capturing the moment. The powerful CEO looking down with unguarded adoration at the beautiful, unknown woman in his arms. It was a perfect, romantic image, and it was about to bring their carefully constructed world crashing down. The photograph from the gala was a spark in a tinderbox. It appeared on society websites and in gossip columns, accompanied by breathless speculation. The city's most eligible and private billionaire was finally stepping out. But with whom? The question did not go unanswered for long. For some, a story of love and redemption was a fairy tale. For others, it was an opportunity, or a threat. The primary threat came from a direction Julian had not anticipated. His own mother. Eleanor Vance was the matriarch of the Vance dynasty, a woman of old money and even older principles. She was a formidable presence, the chairwoman of the family's sprawling philanthropic foundation, a position she wielded with the precision of a surgeon and the authority of a queen. She had watched her son retreat from the world after his family's death, and while she grieved for him, she also despaired at his neglect of his social and familial duties. She saw the photograph of him with Elara not as a sign of healing, but as a symptom of a new, more dangerous affliction, poor judgment. Eleanor dispatched her own investigators. The results they brought back confirmed her worst fears. Elara Jensen, a cleaner from a destitute background, a single mother with a sick child, a woman who had, by some trick or seduction, managed to ensnare her billionaire son. In Eleanor's black and white world, there was only one possible explanation for this scenario. Elara was a gold digger of the highest order. She confronted Julian in his office, slapping the tabloid with the gala photograph on his desk. "What is the meaning of this, Julian? Who is this person?" Julian's face hardened. "Her name is Elara, and she is the woman I am seeing." "Seeing?" Eleanor scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've installed your cleaning woman in your home and you call it seeing? Have you lost your mind? The family name, the company's reputation, do they mean nothing to you anymore? This woman will be your ruin." "You don't know her," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. "I know her type," his mother shot back. "She sees you and she sees a walking, talking bank account. End this foolishness now, before it becomes a public disaster." "This conversation is over," Julian said, standing up. "You will treat Elara with respect, or you will not be a part of my life. The choice is yours." He walked out, leaving his mother seething in his office, her face a mask of cold fury. If her son would not listen to reason, Eleanor decided, she would have to take matters into her own hands. She would deal with the problem at its source. A few days later, while Julian was in a day-long board meeting, the doorman buzzed up to the penthouse. "Mrs. Vance is here to see you, Ms. Jensen." Elara's stomach twisted into a knot. She had never met Julian's mother, but she had heard the awe and fear in the voices of the staff who spoke of her. She smoothed down her simple dress and opened the door. Eleanor Vance swept into the room, her eyes taking in every detail with a critical, dismissive air. She was impeccably dressed, radiating an aura of untouchable power. She did not bother with pleasantries. "So you're the one," she said, her voice as cold as the marble floors. "I'll be honest, I don't see the appeal." Elara stood her ground, her chin held high. "Mrs. Vance, it's an honor to meet you." "Spare me the platitudes," Eleanor said, opening her expensive handbag. She pulled out a checkbook and a gold pen. "Let's get to the point. Every girl has her price. Name yours. I'm prepared to be very generous. Enough for you and your child to disappear and live comfortably for the rest of your lives. Write any number you want." She pushed the open checkbook onto the kitchen island. Elara stared at the blank check, then back at the older woman's hard, cruel face. The insult was so profound, so demeaning, it stole her breath for a moment. All her life, people had underestimated her, judged her for her poverty, for the circumstances she couldn't control. But no one had ever tried to buy her soul. A cold, calm anger settled over her. She picked up the checkbook, not with the pen, but with her whole hand. She looked Eleanor Vance directly in the eye. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she ripped the blank check in half and then in half again. "My son's love is not for sale," Alara said, her voice quiet but shaking with intensity. "And neither am I. You should be ashamed of yourself." Eleanor's perfectly composed face contorted in a flash of rage. "You foolish little girl," she hissed. "You have just made a very powerful enemy. You will regret this." She snatched the torn pieces of the check from the counter, turned on her heel, and stormed out of the penthouse. Alara sank onto a stool, her body trembling. She had won the battle, but she knew, with a sickening certainty, that Eleanor Vance had just declared war. Eleanor's retaliation was swift and brutal. Rebuffed and enraged, she decided that if she couldn't buy Alara off, she would destroy her. She leveraged her vast network of contacts in the media, feeding a carefully crafted, poisonous narrative to a notoriously unscrupulous tabloid journalist. The story broke a week later. The headline was explosive: "Billionaire CEO's New Love, a homeless grifter with a sickly child." The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. It used pictures of Alara's old, dilapidated apartment building, juxtaposed with photos of Julian's luxurious penthouse. It twisted her history of financial struggle into a narrative of irresponsibility and opportunism. Anonymous sources claimed she was an unfit mother who had targeted the grieving billionaire from the moment she met him. Every word was a lie, wrapped around a kernel of truth to make it believable. When Julian saw the story online, a volcanic rage unlike anything he had ever known erupted inside him. He knew immediately that his mother was behind it. But before he could even begin to act, the second phase of Eleanor's attack was launched. An anonymous, concerned tip was made to the city's Child Protective Services. Alara was playing with Lily in the living room when the doorbell rang. Two somber-faced caseworkers stood in the hallway, flashing their badges. "We're here to follow up on a report concerning the welfare of Lily Jensen." Alara's world tilted on its axis. Her greatest, most primal fear as a single, impoverished mother had always been that someone would try to take her child away. To have that nightmare manifest here, in this beautiful, safe home she had just begun to believe in, was a cruelty beyond measure. The interview was a humiliating ordeal. They asked invasive questions about her past, her finances, her ability to care for Lily. Though the penthouse was pristine and Lily was clearly happy and well cared for, the very nature of the investigation was an accusation. It was designed to make her feel like a failure, like a criminal. By the time they left, promising to follow up, Alara was a wreck. She sat on the floor, clutching a bewildered Lily, and sobbed. She had tried so hard to protect her daughter, to build a safe world for her. But her association with Julian, the very thing that had saved them, had now put them in the crosshairs of a world so powerful and ruthless it could destroy them with a single phone call. She saw it all with devastating clarity. As long as she was with Julian, she and Lily would be targets. His mother or others like her would never accept them. They would always see her as the cleaner, the grifter from the tabloids. She had brought this shame, this danger, to Julian's door. She had put her own daughter at risk. The thought was unbearable. With a heart that felt like it was breaking into a million pieces, she made the only decision she felt she could. She had to leave. It was the only way to protect them all. She packed their few belongings into a single suitcase, the same one she'd arrived with. She wrote a short, tear-stained note for Julian, leaving it on the kitchen island where they had shared so many happy meals. "I'm so sorry," it read. "I can't let you or Lily get hurt because of me. Thank you for everything. I will love you always." She took Lily by the hand, her daughter's face etched with confusion. "Where are we going, Mommy?" "We're going on an adventure, sweetie," Alara whispered, her voice choked with tears. As she was opening the door to leave, the elevator chimed. The doors slid open, and Julian stepped out. He had come home early, a knot of dread in his stomach after seeing the tabloid story. He stopped short, his eyes taking in the scene before him. Alara, her face pale and tear-streaked, holding Lily's hand, a packed suitcase at her feet. His gaze fell on the tabloid lying on a side table, then to the letter on the island. And he understood. "Alara," he said, his voice raw with pain. "Don't. I have to," she cried, pulling the door open. "Don't you see? I'm destroying you. They're coming after my daughter because of me, because of us. I can't let that happen. It's better this way." "No," he said, his voice ringing with a power and conviction she had never heard before. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, gently closing the door and taking the suitcase from her hand. He knelt down so he was at eye level with her. He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me," he said, his dark eyes blazing with intensity. "Before you and Lily, this place was a mausoleum. I was a ghost. You didn't bring danger to my door, Alara. You brought me life. You and Lily are my home now. There is no me without you. Do you understand? There is nowhere you can go that I won't follow." He saw the flicker of doubt and fear still in her eyes. He knew words weren't enough. He had to show her. He had to fight for her, for them in the only way he knew how. Publicly, unambiguously. He had to choose. And for him, there was no choice at all. "Stay here," he commanded gently. "Watch the news at 5 o'clock." He kissed her forehead, then turned to his phone, dialing his head of PR. "Clear my schedule. And book the press room. I'm holding a conference in 1 hour." The press room at Vance Innovations was packed. Every major news outlet in the city was there, drawn by the promise of a statement from the reclusive CEO at the center of a brewing scandal. Julian Vance walked to the podium, not with the air of a man in crisis, but with the calm, resolute bearing of a man on a mission. The cameras flashed, a storm of light reflecting off his grim face. In the penthouse, Alara watched on the large television, her heart pounding in her chest, Lily sitting quietly beside her. She didn't know what to expect, what he could possibly say to fix this. Julian didn't read from a statement. He looked directly into the sea of cameras, as if he were speaking to each person individually, as if he were speaking directly to Alara. "I'm here today to address the recent, vicious rumors published about my personal life," he began, his voice steady and strong. "I will not dignify the lies with a point-by-point rebuttal. Instead, I am going to tell you the truth." He paused, letting the room fall into a rapt silence. "Several years ago, I lost my wife, Sarah, and my 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, in a tragic accident. In the aftermath of that loss, I closed myself off from the world. I built a fortress of wealth and work around my grief, and I lived inside it, a hollow man in an empty home. I believed that was all my life would ever be." He took a breath, his gaze unwavering. "And then I met Alara Jensen. I met her in a moment of her own private crisis, and I saw in her a strength and a dignity I have rarely witnessed. She is a woman who has faced unimaginable hardship and has never once compromised her integrity. She is the most devoted mother I have ever known. She and her daughter, Lily, did not come into my life seeking wealth or advantage. They came into my life and they shattered the walls of my fortress. They filled my empty home with laughter and warmth and hope. They saved me from the ghost I had become." His voice grew harder, a sharp edge of anger cutting through the grief. "The recent attacks on her character are not journalism. They are a cowardly, malicious assault, orchestrated by those who value pedigree over character and money over love. These actions were taken against my explicit wishes, and they will not stand." He looked directly into the main network camera. "Effective immediately, I am severing all personal and professional ties with the Vance Family Foundation. I will be liquidating my shares and using the capital to launch a new foundation, in my daughter Sophie's name, dedicated to providing world-class medical care for children with respiratory illnesses, regardless of their family's ability to pay. Our first beneficiary and inspiration will be Lily Jensen. The room erupted in a flurry of shouted questions. Julian held up a hand for silence. "Finally," he said, his voice softening once more as he looked into the camera, his eyes finding Alara's through the lens. "The tabloids ask who Alara Jensen is. I will tell you. She is the finest, most honorable, and most courageous woman I have ever known. She is the light of my life. And I am taking this opportunity, in front of all of you, to ask her to be my wife." In the penthouse, Alara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face, but they were not tears of sorrow or fear. They were tears of overwhelming love and relief. Lily, sensing the shift, wrapped her small arms around her mother's neck. "Is Mr. Julian going to be my new daddy?" she whispered. Alara just nodded, unable to speak, her eyes locked on the face of the man on the screen, the man who had just torn down his entire world to build a new one with her. 1 year later, the sun shone brightly on the gleaming glass facade of the newly opened Sophie and Lily Vance Center for Pediatric Health. A crowd of dignitaries, doctors, and families had gathered for the dedication ceremony. On the podium, Alara Vance stood, poised and radiant in a simple, elegant blue dress. She was no longer the timid, frightened woman from the pharmacy. She was a woman who had found her voice, her purpose. "Hope," she said, her voice clear and confident, carrying over the assembled crowd. "Hope is not the absence of hardship. It is the light we find in the midst of it. It's the kindness of a stranger in the middle of the night. It's the unconditional love of a child. This center is a testament to that hope. It is a promise that no parent will ever have to feel the desperation I once felt, the fear of not being able to care for their child." In the front row, Julian watched her, his heart full to bursting. He held a healthy, giggling Lily in his arms. She was thriving, her asthma completely under control thanks to the cutting-edge care provided by the center named partially for her. He looked from his wife to the child in his arms, this incredible, impossible family that had been born from a moment of crisis. His mother, Eleanor, was not there. After the press conference, a chasm had opened between them. He had made his choice, and she had been unable to accept it. He hoped that one day she would, but he would not sacrifice his family's happiness for her approval. Later that day, back in his office at Vance Innovations, an office now decorated with a chaotic, colorful gallery of Lily's artwork, he looked at the small, framed drawing on his desk. It was the first one she had ever given him, the wobbly cat she had taped to his monitor. It was his most prized possession. That evening, the three of them were at home in the penthouse, which was now truly a home, filled with the comfortable clutter of family life. They were sitting on the floor, building an elaborate castle out of blocks. "Higher, Daddy!" Lily squealed with delight as Julian placed the final block on the tallest tower. He smiled, catching Alara's eye over their daughter's head. The love that passed between them was a silent, powerful current. He had offered her security, a job, a home, but she, in return, had given him something far more valuable. She had given him back his heart. As he tucked Lily into bed that night, she threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweet pea," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He walked back into the living room where Alara was waiting for him by the large windows overlooking the glittering city. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the endless stream of lights below. They had come so far from that cold, desperate night in the pharmacy. Their two broken paths had converged to create a new one, a path paved with kindness, courage, and a love that had healed them both. They had learned that true wealth isn't measured by the numbers in a bank account, but by the fullness of a loving heart and the family you build within the shelter of its walls. This story is a reminder that a single act of compassion can ripple outwards, changing lives in ways we can never predict. It shows that love can bloom in the most unexpected of places, bridging divides of class and experience, and that the greatest strength is found in vulnerability and the courage to open a closed heart. If this soul-stirring story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales of love, kindness, and the incredible power of the human spirit.